What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you my first impressions of SKALD Against the Black Priory, a retro RPG inspired by classics and a little bit of Lovecraftian horror. And as you may be aware as you watch this video, this is actually coming out about a day before the game's official launch, and that is because the game's publisher, Priory, sent me over a review copy, though I wasn't quite able to finish it in time, so you're getting these first impressions at embargo time. Now, this isn't the first time I've taken a look at SKALD. I actually played a demo of it quite some time ago that I enjoyed a fair bit, and right away, in terms of first impressions, I would say the full version goes a decent way to address that. For starters, as you can probably see on screen, the very pixelated graphics and nature of it, while certainly a throwback to older titles, does present a bit of a clarity issue, at least visually in some cases, and when you fire up the game it will present a few basic options that you can set up to make sure the font and the background to that font is legible for you. And if you go to the game's options, you can actually find even more stuff to toggle and mess around with in this regard, so I was happy to see that, as I remember from the demo some of it being very difficult to read. So right away, in terms of just clearing up things from the demo, like visual clarity, I think they're on the right track, and technical state-wise, the game so far seems to be pretty stable for me. Obviously, with this not being fully released, I can't speak for everybody, but I haven't run into really any bugs or anything like that. But from there, let's talk a little bit about the story setup for this game. So right away, obviously, eldritch horror and the like plays a significant role, but what are we actually doing? Well, we take on the role of a mercenary who is on a ship to an island called, I believe it's Hydra, which is a single island that makes up what is called the Outer Isles. We are going to this island along with our mercenary crew to track down a missing noblewoman that, after a giant tentacle monster sinks your ship and you wash up on shore, you have a flashback reminding you that you were given this mission by your family's previous employer when you were a child. Your father worked for them before ultimately having to leave in disgrace, so this is your chance to either clear your name, simply earn some gold, etc. But long story short, we're headed to a chain of islands looking for a very specific woman who happened to have been our own childhood friend, but the relationship beyond that is pretty much yours to define. However, quickly upon arriving to the island, if the shipwreck by the monster wasn't clear enough, something is terribly wrong here. There are all sorts of monstrous beasts and just general eldritch horrors running around, and that's to say nothing of the people who are seemingly involved with them. Now that's about as much as I want to say story-wise. Obviously I don't want to spoil anything here, but I do think that little plot setup by itself does a pretty good job of throwing you directly into the mystery, what's going on, and at the same time puts you in a very dreary, oppressive environment where you're simply going to have to do your best to survive while also trying to unravel this mystery. Now when it comes to surviving, speaking of, we can talk a little bit about character creation. Though first the game will ask you to pick a difficulty. Now you can pick everything from narrative to hard. Normal, of course, being the intended difficulty, but you can also make things much easier, which I think will likely be necessary, at least to some degree for some people, simply because as a game with a bit of an older feel, with its own unique system, some of these rules might be hard to get your head around without jumping into the game a little bit first, so these difficulty options are certainly welcome. But from there we can actually start the character creation process. We'll get to pick first from a handful of classes, which represent a whole host of archetypes and playstyles, with some of the basics to more specific stuff in mind. First up, you got your Arms Master, which is like your basic fighter that can handle pretty much any kind of weapon but doesn't deal in magic. Then you have your Battle Magos, which is essentially your mage. But then other classes actually lean a more bit heavy into the magic side of things, being able to learn basically every possible school of magic, but at the cost of their combat feats being completely removed. Then you got stuff like the Officer that, while not great on its own, is a fantastic support character that can inspire party members to do much more than they normally would, to serve as a bit of a force multiplier, as the game puts it. So in general, I would say you've got a mix of the classics and a few hybrid classes that will likely, I would say, cover the majority of what people would want to do. Now from there we pick our background. These are going to affect some of our starting stats or bonuses, if you will. Some will simply give you extra carry capacity, others will give you extra experience, some will give you points in various skills, and it's my understanding these will also influence the narrative a little bit, but I haven't been able to see too much of that yet. But then we move on to attributes. Now, while this game does use its own system, I would say if you're familiar with tabletop RPGs, you'll likely be relatively familiar with how this goes, as it's divided into primary stats and skills, which then make up a host of secondary stats. Now, I've played the game for a few hours and leveled up many times, and so far, nothing besides items has really messed with any of this stuff, which means that these choices in character creation are pretty important. But the general gist of it is you'll put the primary stats into, of course, your main class's primary stat, so they can be effective at the thing you chose that class for, and then your skills, of course, will already have a bunch of passive bonuses based on your choices for your primary stats, and you'll likely simply lean into the skills that you have the biggest bonuses to, but in general they do things that you would expect, with diplomacy acting as your sort of charisma skill and your ability to talk around problems, stealth and thievery being involved in, of course, stealth and thievery, which is mostly to say that those systems exist in the game, and occasionally, though, you're going to be making dice rolls against various skill checks for either your primary stat or your skills, and it takes those bonuses plus a roll of a 2d6 against a difficulty check to decide whether or not you pass. So again, relatively familiar if you play a lot of these types of games, but a few odds and ends to familiarize yourself with. Now, I would say the bigger thing to note, though, is the feats. What feats are available to you is going to depend on your class, essentially, as each little grouping of feats represents a line of skills that you can put points into that will add extra abilities, give you extra actions in combat that you can take, etc. So for the most part, this is straightforward things like increasing the things associated with your class, like your mastery of certain weapons or armor types or just general play styles. For instance, my ranger here can get increases to their ability to wield a bow, and each individual node here has a bunch of tiers to it, so you'll pump a bunch of points into this. Most people seem to get 3 ranks per level. I'm not sure if that's set in stone or if anything influences it, and I know the max level is 20, so obviously we're not going to be able to grab every single feat here, but overall I'd say this does a decent job of balancing a decently interesting system that gives you a bunch of builds to play around with while at the same time not being needlessly complicated. But then to wrap up character creation, you then pick a few different options to customize your sprite, and then you're going to get thrown into the game proper. So what's the actual gameplay like? Well, if you've ever played an older CRPG, or even a JRPG really, you'd kind of get the gist of it. Basically, we're going to be wandering around little individual maps, navigating the content via our various skills and abilities with some companions or mercenaries in tow, with a variety of ways to approach any given situation, such as, of course, attacking head-on, trying to talk our way out of it, utilizing stealth to bypass the problem entirely, or simply finding alternative solutions to various quests and the like. Now, outside of location maps, you'll be thrown onto a world map that you'll be able to run around and track down where you need to go next. Now, there will be some random encounters on this map, but on the location maps, they're all set encounters as you run into enemies. But enemies won't be the only thing you'll be running into, as this is a party-based RPG after all, so there's a fair few companions and the like to meet. Now, I've found 2 named ones so far, and then you can also hire mercenaries here and there. You'll run into a character who, for an amount of gold, will join your party as a sort of generic companion, simply to take part in the action economy, though generally these guys are a bit expensive. Now, the regular companions I've run into are a thief that was part of the ship crew that crashed, and then one of our veteran mercenary friends who also managed to survive the crash. Though it's my understanding we will be getting quite a few more, as when you're out in the world or on a location map, you can choose to rest, and at the cost of food, you can heal up your character's injuries or vitality, while each of your characters also performs some camp task like training up troops for a small XP reward or a handful of other things they can get up to. But naturally, we'll also be using all these characters in combat. So what does that look like? So as you might imagine, it is a turn-based tactical system, though a few important things to note. Your initiative order is over there on the left that you can pull up and see exactly when each character will go, including the enemies. And towards the bottom right there, you can see your movement points and your action points. Each character has a set amount of movement they can take, but they can also use their action to move if they want. But of course, this leaves them unable to attack that turn, whereas attacking will eat up your movement points and generally end your turn. Pretty standard stuff, but what makes it interesting really is all of those classes you can get. For instance, I picked up a ranger myself who could, thanks to a spell they learned, summon in a giant insect to draw attention away from them while I shot things with a bow from the back. And then there's all sorts of other mechanics like, say, backstabbing or simply utilizing stealth, which is a percentage-based system, down to the light you're in and how close you are to enemies to avoid combat entirely. But so far, there's been a bunch of different weapons and abilities to play around with, and I'm especially interested to see if over the course of my time with the game as I move to review it, whether or not that combat manages to be compelling across the entire thing, utilizing its variety of classes, abilities, etc. But something you have to watch out for in combat is your vitality and your wounds. Now, everyone has these two health bars, essentially. The green one on your portraits there is your kind of regular old health. This is the damage you can take safely without taking on an injury, and it's pretty easy to replace via healing and resting. Then there is your wounds. This is the purple bar below the green one that represents the health that you have that if it gets hit will result in an injury on your character, making them weaker until you manage to heal them up. Giving you an incentive, of course, to avoid grievous harm in combat, as characters can be knocked unconscious and the like once they hit 0 of these. So to put all of that together and sort of wrap this first impressions video up, I would say SKALD here is doing a ton of stuff, and at least just a few hours in, I'm having a lot of fun exploring all of that stuff. But because it's trying to do so much, when I move to actually review the title, I think it will be especially interesting to see if it manages to tie all these things together in a compelling way, and how much replayability there may or may not be with this story about eldritch horrors haunting these chains of islands. But as first impressions go, I would say if the retro look of the game doesn't bother you, then there might just be a very compelling experience under here, and I'm excited to dive into it more and find that out for myself as I move to review the title. So if you're looking forward to the full review, or if you simply enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.